Okay, thank you. Welcome all. Today's seventh session is again a session about dream and poetry. And I will first introduce you Beyza Nur. Beyza Nur Sıg is a student at Istanbul Kültür University, a fourth-year student. And I would like to read her own sentences because they're individual and very good. She says, I was born in 1998 and a last year student at Istanbul Kültür University. I am a passionate undergrad student who wants to build an academic career in English literature. For that reason, I could not miss this chance to engage with so many passionate and brilliant undergrad students and their works. She's talking about you, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that if she says, I believe that I will have a chance to experience an e-conference in which I take a role of presenter along with other students for the first time. And it will help me to gain more confidence in the academic field and motivate me to participate in upcoming conferences. And I agree with you. This is such a great experience. And as your lecturers, we are also proud of each of you. And you can also see from our smiles that we enjoy each second. Thank you for presenting great works. And Beyza Nur's subject is Percy Bysshe Shelley, a romantic poet, probably you all know. And she's going to approach one of her famous poems in an interesting way. The title of her presentation is Unconventional Dream Vision in Percy Bysshe Shelley's Apocalypse, The Mask of Anarchy. And the floor is yours, Beyza.
Thank you so much. Before discussing my presentation, I would like to thank you, the conference committee, for providing such an academic and beautiful environment for us. If you allow me, I'm starting my discussion. Percy Bysshe Shelley's The Mask of Anarchy is a product of romantic vision which fuses religious dream vision into the unconventional interpretation of apocalyptic dreams. It was written in 1819, immediately after the Peterloo massacre in Manchester, where hundreds of people gathered to voice the need for reform in the English government and were killed and injured by the state's cavalry. The event was regarded as early signs of apocalypse for the believers, with the bloodshed and oppression to which the public reacted through newspapers, pamphlets, and literary works. Shelley, who was away from England at the time of the massacre, wrote the sad poem by employing apocalyptic dream visions to challenge the conventional use of dream vision and to criticize organized religion and institutionalization of law and government by underscoring the need for reformation. The Mask of Anarchy mirrors Shelley's politicized apocalyptic space in the context of Peterloo by way of dream revelations. The poet's use of apocalypse is unconventional and political rather than traditional and religious because the poem exposes his support of reform rather than revolution in the context of 19th century's corrupted politics and disastrous effects of the French Revolution, which caused a fear of apocalypse in England. In this presentation, I would like to add a new dimension to the employment of dream form and Shelley's unconventional apocalypse in The Mask by discussing Shelley's employment of conventional dream vision for an unconventional political agenda, that is his demand of English reform rather than revolution. I will discuss the perception of the apocalypse in the early 19th century, the French Revolution's effect on the fear of apocalypse, and the Shelley's political criticism in the poem with a motivating force. The English scholar Norman Cohn defines apocalypse as, I'm quoting, the Greek word apocalypsis means unveiling, uncovering. Chiefly, it is about the destiny of this old world, unquote. The idea of destiny of this world connotes the present situation of the world, which might result in a causal chain of events for the apocalyptic end. The English art historian David Bindman talks about the fear of apocalypse resulting from the failing politics and corruption. He talks about the public, as I'm quoting, acting activities detrimental to the poor, like the imposition of law and the accumulation of wealth, were readily seen as the work of the beast, under the guidance of the dragon, who was Satan. Unquote. The present social conditions were regarded as the works of evil, which might result in the actualization of apocalyptic events and foretell the destiny of this world. Suffering, hunger, and death of people under the failing English government occasionally led to the widespread fear of apocalypse. This fear prevailed during the French Revolution, which Bindman summarizes, as I'm quoting, "The Book of Revelation was a book for troubled times, but in the relatively peaceful course of the 18th century in England, it lost much of its immediacy until the advent of the French Revolution. In the 18th century, the Book of Revelation itself became identified." Unquote. The chaos and brutality of the French Revolution led to the fear that the apocalypse is near, and the evil set loose in the world. As opposed to others, Shelley saw the problematic strategy behind French Revolution. In a philosophical view of reform, Shelley talks about the deadly effects of revolution by suggesting reformation for liberation, as I am quoting. "A republic, however just in its principle and glorious in its object, would through the violence and sudden change which must attend it, incur a great risk of being as rapid in its decline as in its growth. It is better that they should see the clear grounds of their rights, and be impressed with the just persuasion that patience and reason and endurance are the means of a calm yet irresistible progress." Unquote. He criticized the French by saying that their impatience and violence led them to the revolution, which ended in bloodshed and defeat. Quote, "Their desire to wreak revenge to this extent in itself a mistake, a crime, a calamity, arose from the same source as their other miseries and errors, and affords an additional proof of the necessity of that long-delayed change which it accompanied and disgraced." Unquote. Acknowledging the political apocalypse in England, Shelley constantly urges the English for reform. In Reform, he states that, quote, "It is no matter how slow, gradual, and cautious be the change, we shall demand more and more with firmness and moderation, never anticipating but never deferring the moment of successful opposition, so that the people may become habituated to exercising the functions of sovereignty in proportion as they acquire the possession of it." Unquote. For Shelley, the Book of Revelation itself became identified when he witnessed the disastrous effects of the French Revolution and the Peterloo Massacre, where thousands of people who protested for reformation were either killed or injured. As a result, Shelley took a stand against the English government by using Peterloo as an apocalyptic space in the Masque to discuss the need for reformation over revolution for a permanent change. The poem opens with the speaker indicating that he dreams about what he's going to tell, which implies that the entire narrative is dream revelations. The speaker says, quote, "As I lay asleep in Italy, there came a voice from over the sea, and with great power it forth me to walk in the visions of poesy." Unquote. The distinguishing characteristic of dream vision in this form is that the visions are not sent by God, but they come from the poesy, which transfers the power of divinity to poetry. The poem unfolds through allegorical personifications which are conventional in structure. The speaker alludes to English politicians by saying, quote, "I met murder on the way, he had a mask like Cassara. Next came fraud, and he had on, like Alden, an ermine gown. Next, hypocrisy on a crocodile rode by, and last came anarchy, like death in the apocalypse." Unquote. Even though these allegorical personifications concerning the apocalyptic content of the dream seem to be conventional in form, they are unconventional in their political content. The persona evokes the imagery of the Antichrist's coming in the following lines after telling the deaths and sufferings of pious Christians. Quote, "We have waited for thy coming, mighty one. Our purses are empty. Give us glory and blood and gold." Unquote. The reader is convinced by the evilness of the Antichrist when she learns that, quote, "7 bloodhounds followed him, and he, murder, tossed them human hearts to chew, and the little children, thinking every tear a gem, had their brains knocked out by them." Unquote. After portraying such cruelty regarding Antichrist, Shelley constantly brings up the religious position of these allegorical figures. He says, quote, "Clothed with the Bible as with light and the shadows of the night, whispering thou art law and God." Unquote. By reversing the Antichrist with figures from religion and law, and introducing the Savior of English not as the Christ, but as hope, Shelley plays with the biblical notion of the second coming of Jesus and emphasizes the need for reformation. The speaker indicates the tiring process of waiting for reformation to come when hope declares that, quote, "My father time is weak and grey, but waiting for a better day." The speaker introduces a mist, a light, an image, unquote, that rose and defeated anarchy through hope by portraying the scene as follows, quote, "Ankle deep in blood, hope, that maiden most serene, was walking with a quiet mien, and anarchy, the ghastly birth, laid that earth upon the earth," unquote. After anarchy is defeated, a chance for reformation is born and advocated by hope. The use of inverted commas at the beginning of each line draws attention to hope's divine authority to foretell the destiny of English through the visions of poesy. Hope prophesies the upcoming liberation of the English and urges them to defy the state by saying, quote, "Let a vast assembly be, and with great solemnity declare with measured words that ye are as God has made ye, free. And these words shall then become like oppression's thunderous doom, ringing through each heart and brain, rise like lions after slumber in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth like dew, which in sleep had fallen on you." Unquote. Hope's rhetoric is similar to the divine creator, with the use "let," "these words shall then become," and "in sleep had fallen on you," which point out the divine knowledge of the poet as unacknowledged legislators whom the gigantic shadows which futurity casts upon. Making use of poet and poetry, the source of divine knowledge, Shelley challenges the conventional structure of dream vision. The poet-prophet foretells a bright future and liberty through the personification of hope. The divine voice with inverted comma advised the English as follows, quote, "That it is to feel revenge, fiercely thirsting to exchange blood for blood and wrong for wrong. Do not thus when ye are strong. Stand ye calm and resolute with folded arms and looks, which are weapons of unvanquished war. And if then the tyrants dare, let them right among you there, slash and stab and maim and hew, what they like that let them do. With folded arms and steady eyes, and little fear and less surprise, look upon them as they slay, till their rage has died away." Unquote. The poem ends with hope, which symbolizes reform, and her foretelling of reformation through non-violent protest, which promises liberty. Hope's advice for non-violent protest draws attention to Shelley's acknowledgement of the disastrous effects of the French Revolution and its failure for liberty. The poet advises reform and voices its everlasting effects by forbidding violence of revolution. Even though the poem portrays apocalyptic visions and biblical references, it doesn't point out a Christian apocalypse. and savior. It reflects Shelley's political apocalypse, which is an unreformed England. The Mask of Anarchy mirrors Shelley's conceptualization of a political apocalypse and presents his view on the necessity of reformation through the employment of dream vision and biblical references. In contrast to the structure of the poem, Shelley presents an unconventional dream vision through the use of political figures as allegories. Peterloo as an apocalyptic space, foretelling the destiny of humanity from the vision of poetry, and suggesting the need for reform. The poem reveals the political agenda in his use of apocalyptic dream vision, and highlights the function of dream vision in this form, which is to assign divine knowledge to the poet and poetry by forming a political apocalypse and foretelling upcoming liberty. Thank you for listening. This is the end of my paper.
Thank you, Beyza, for this exceptional presentation. I really enjoyed it. So, well, I also have some commentaries myself, but before I do that, we can leave the floor for questions for our listeners. So, the floor is open for the questions, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm expecting some hands to raise. No one is asking any question?
There's one.
Well, I have.
No, there's one. Murat Kabak.
Okay, I couldn't see that. Sorry. Using that from my mobile phone. Sorry. Okay, Murat, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
The floor is yours. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, first of all, Mehmet Ali Hocam, for this wonderful conference. I had a class in the morning, so I couldn't attend the other sessions, but I'm looking forward for the other sessions. And I would like to thank Beyza for this great paper. I really enjoyed your way of close reading the poem. My contribution would be more of a comment than a question. Maybe you can expand on these ideas, and I especially liked how you distinguished prophecy from apocalypse, because as you mentioned, the apocalypse in the Judeo-Christian belief, it has this pessimistic or passive or reactionary tone. We have more of a prophecy, more optimistic and active and progressive vision that has been supported in this poem. So maybe you can think of this project in the future by looking at some contemporary writers. Tom Moylan, for instance, he's writing on utopian, dystopian literature, and he's distinguishing these categories. Maybe you can think about how Shelley thought about this religious or secular utopia in the context of this apocalypse. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for your comment. Yeah.
Yes, Murat, thank you for your contribution and also your commentary. And I think Miraç is also raising her hand for commentary or question. The floor is yours, Miraç.
Thank you, sir. And also, it's good to see you again. It's been
Yes,
so long that I haven't seen you. This reminded me George R.R. Martin's comment on Tolkien's book, The Lord of the Rings. I'm not into poetry so much, so I haven't read this poem before. And thank you for presenting. Mine is just a comment, not a question. George R.R. Martin says at the end of The Lord of the Rings, spoiler alert, Aragorn becomes king. But what was his tax policy? So after apocalyptic resolution, there is post-apocalyptic scene that we must consider. What will happen after the apocalypse? What will happen after the apocalyptic solution? I believe he doesn't mention that, as Tolkien didn't mention in his book. So that kind of bold statements like "rise like lions after slumber" has some dangerous effects. But anyway, still, it's a good poem. He's Shelley, so who are we to judge? But thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miraj, for your commentary. So I cannot see any more hands. Maybe Mehmet Ali Hocam, would you like to say something?
I was waiting for the audience to ask questions or comments, but if there's nobody to say something about it, I thought that it was a very well organized paper, Beyza. Congratulations. And again, I'd like to extend the idea over the other romantic poets. Percy Shelley's contemporaries. For instance, what do you think about the dream sequence or dreamlike sequences in the in Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner? If you are familiar with the poem, which I'm sure you might be familiar. And in what sense do you find similarities and differences from the poem you're studying?
That's a good question, Hocam. I'm not sure about Coleridge's agenda writing this poem, but while I was digging and trying to make some researches about romantic poets and their understanding of dreams, theme, I've discovered that romantics regard dreams as poetic imaginings, some kind of understanding poets as prophets. They regard themselves not just prophets of the gods, but they declare their imagination some kind of uniqueness. Their aim is to some progression about the society. And I think in that sense, maybe Coleridge and Shelley is similar by embracing this theme, by embracing themselves as poets. They are, I think, more secular in this understanding of dreams. And I think this is what makes them unconventional and which is pretty good.
Okay, thank you very much.
I also would like to myself contribute you something if I can. I also remembered Dante's Divine Comedy when I read that poem. Of course, the dream vision comes from the Middle Ages. Even in Piers Plum by Langland, we can see such a thing. There might be they might look different, but Dante also brings a different dimension to religion. He, in fact, adds a kind of philosophical dimension to religion. So just like Shelley, who in fact creates a different dimension into politics, into protest, with a non-violent protest, and trying to make people think from a different perspective, I believe that Dante did the same in terms of religion. And thinking of the religious references, thinking of the allegorical representations, I thought there could be a lot of similarities between the Divine Comedy of Dante and also the poem of Shelley.
Yes, I agree with you, Hocam, because in the poem, Shelley makes use of also the traditional structure. As Dante, he introduces the poem by saying that the persona sleeps in Italy, and there comes some vision, and there are also allegorical figures. But I think maybe the difference between these two poets is Dante maybe is more religious in his writing. His agenda is maybe religious, but Shelley is more political in his writing and in his use of these traditional structures.
Yes, I agree with you, and thank you. Thank you. So, if there's no more commentary or questions, then I'm ending the session. Thank you so much, Beyza Nur, for this great presentation. It was really promising, and I believe that everybody who was in the session enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So,
See you in the follow